Video recording started. Okay, welcome everyone to this very first kind of Meet the Candidates town hall organized by APAPA, which is Asian Pacific Islander Public Affairs, and in partnership with Idea Education Foundation. I'm the Liang Chao. I'm the vice mayor of Cupertino, but I got elected in 2018. Before that, I really have very little knowledge of public affairs. And then since I elected, it has been a part of my passion to get young people involved. And therefore, today's forum will be moderated by 3 high schoolers. And what I do here has nothing to do with my job as city council. So anything here is just it's all in my individual capacity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator for the first part of the forum. Is Sanjay Muralidharan. He is a senior in Washington High School, planning to attend UC San Diego to study political science. He is passionate about issues relating to the plight of working class, automation, the effectiveness of our legislative system, and political polarization. In the future, he hopes to run for public office. I've worked with him for two years, and he has been a stellar student, and really proud to get to know him and sending him off to college now. Yeah, hopefully we could support his candidacy one day. So, Sanjay, yeah, you can use that one.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Liang, for that great introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. Is this good? Straight? Okay. So before we begin this event, I just wanted to lay down some ground rules due to some past recent controversies surrounding this race. The intent of this event is to foster a relationship between every candidate and the community, regardless of who gets elected. The candidates should focus primarily on policy issues that the community cares about and refrain from attacking other candidates. The audience should keep an open mind while listening and refrain from campaigning for or against any candidate during the event. Questions should be asked in a respectful manner, and even though the content of the questions may be pointed and challenging. And I just wanted to give a brief introduction to who Mr. Khan is. So Sajid Khan is a San Jose native and a first-generation Muslim Indian American. He is a proud graduate of San Jose High School and UC Berkeley. After earning his Juris Doctorate from UC Hastings College of Law in 2008, Sajid began his career as a public defender. Over the last 14 years as a public defender in San Jose, Sajid has fought for the people's dignity and constitutional rights, and against systemic racism and mass incarceration, handling every type of case from low-level misdemeanors to death penalty litigation. Through these experiences, Sajid has learned the criminal legal system inside and out. Sajid is running to be your 2022 District Attorney in Santa Clara. Now, Mr. Khan, could you please give a brief introduction about yourself and your campaign to the audience?
Sure.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Good.
So good morning. Thank you all for being here on this lovely Sunday morning and breathing life into our democracy. One of the most gratifying parts of this candidacy is seeing community members come out to listen and to learn and to be a part of this really critical moment in our community and to, again, be a part of our living, breathing democracy. So my name is Sajid Khan, and as the moderator mentioned, I am a proud son of Muslim immigrants from South India who raised me and my siblings here in the South Bay. I was born at the old Alexian Brothers Hospital off of McKee and Jackson in San Jose. Spent the first 14 years of my life in Milpitas along with my siblings before our family moved us to San Jose when I was in high school. As was mentioned, I'm a proud graduate of San Jose High School. I went on to UC Berkeley and UC Hastings College of the Law and am now living back here in San Jose and raising 2 young sons here in the South Bay. For the last 14 years, I have served this community as a deputy public defender, fighting for the rights and dignity of our community's most marginalized people. I've been in our jails, I've been in our juvenile hall, I've been in our neighborhoods, and I've been in our courtrooms, and I've seen our current system inflict generational harm on communities of color and marginalized people. I've seen our current system perpetuate the harms of police brutality and mass incarceration and fail to keep us collectively and sustainably safe. And it's for those reasons that I'm now running for Santa Clara County District Attorney, because I am committed to healing systemic racism, fighting mass incarceration, making our communities safer by addressing the root causes of crime, and hopefully building a justice system that ensures and protects the dignity and safety of all people here in Santa Clara County, which, as I've mentioned, is the place that I've called home my entire life. It was mentioned that I'm a graduate of San Jose High and UC Berkeley and UC Hastings. The summer between my college and law school, I actually took a class at De Anza College just down the street. Cupertino has been part of my childhood and adulthood as well. I often spend nights at the donut wheel and roaming around Cupertino, so it's really grateful. I'm really grateful to be here. I want to mention a couple things about my platform and about why I'm running and what I intend to do when I'm elected. So when I'm elected, I'm committed to making our community safer, preventing violent and property crimes by addressing the root causes of harm in our community and investing in mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, and other alternatives to incarceration. I'm also invested in dismantling and preventing our school to prison pipeline, including ending the practice of prosecuting 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old children as adults. I'm also committed to holding police accountable when they violate the lives and dignity of our people. And finally, I'm committed to ensuring that survivors of harm are made whole and healed through access to trauma-informed care. I know I have a couple minutes. How long do I have for this?
Like 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna, the issue of the school to prison pipeline is one that I wanna take a moment to talk about. So a few years ago, in 2016, I was assigned to represent a 14-year-old Latino boy who was accused of a serious crime, but he was not brought to juvenile court. Instead, he was brought in shackles at the ankles, waist, and hands into our adult courtroom in Santa Clara County, where our incumbent district attorney prosecuted him as an adult. And when I presented information about this young boy, about his trauma history, his severe history of neglect and abuse, his unique capacity for rehabilitation and redemption, and also presented information about children not being fully formed adults just by virtue of their physiology, our district attorney refused to acknowledge that and insisted that this child be prosecuted and punished as an adult. That was the reality in Santa Clara County, and I took that injustice and that frustration to the state capitol. I went to Sacramento alongside juvenile justice advocates to fight for the enactment of a law called SB 1391, which ended the practice of prosecuting 14 and 15-year-old children as adults. And that law was actually opposed by our incumbent DA, both in the state capitol and in our courts. So if it was up to our incumbent, we would continue to the practice of prosecuting 14 and 15-year-old children as adults. In fact, between 2010 and 2014, our incumbent DA prosecuted 477 children in our community as adults, many of whom are still sitting in our state prisons to this day. And when I'm elected, I will end the practice of prosecuting 16 and 17-year-old adults, which our incumbent DA continues to do. I'm happy to talk more through this morning about the other issues that are important to me, but I look forward to this great conversation, and I hope to earn your support in this June primary as to be your next Santa Clara County District Attorney. Thank you.
So
I'll defer to the moderator.
yeah, so I have a brief list of questions here, so I'm gonna ask like a few and then open it up to the audience. So I just wanted to begin in the kind of the relation to the issue of juvenile justice. In one of your ads, you mentioned that investing in our young people instead of criminalizing them is how we ensure public safety today and in the long term. How do you plan on executing this ideal in practice as DA?
Yeah, thank you. So as part of my years as a public defender here in Santa Clara County, I actually spent 2.5 years in our juvenile court representing children as young as 12 and 13. And as I've mentioned, I've represented several children who have been prosecuted and punished as adults. And I've also represented children who become adults in our jails and taken moments in time to sit with those people, meet their families, and understand the root causes of harm in our community. When you meet children in our juvenile halls, when you meet people who have now become adults in our jails, I've become well acquainted with the root causes of harm. harm does not happen, crime does not happen in a vacuum. It's not a function of bad people, which sometimes we are sometimes deluded to believe. Crime happens in context. Oftentimes people commit harms as a result of unhealed trauma, mental illness, substance abuse issues, poverty, or a constellation of all those issues, especially with our young people. The children that I have represented who have been prosecuted as adults, all without fail, have mental health issues, have undiagnosed special education needs, have had trauma in their lives, have had family separation, have been subject to abuse and neglect, and have often gone to schools in places like East San Jose or in Gilroy, where they are not met with the services that they need, where they're not met with small classroom sizes or trauma-informed teachers that are able to give them the support that they need. And instead, those children are suspended, they're expelled, they move around quite a bit, and then oftentimes those suspensions and expulsions roll into people ending up in our juvenile system, and then that oftentimes results in them ending up in our adult system. So it's really critical that as district attorney, we have someone who sees that, who acknowledges that the root causes of harm are those factors, and is fighting for investment in mental health treatment, diversion programs, restorative justice programs that keep children out of our juvenile justice system, out of our adult system, and instead recognize their core needs and invest in those core needs. It's also really important that we have a district attorney that is working with leaders like Liang in cities like Cupertino, in San Jose, in Santa Clara, across our county, to fight for reallocation of resources away from our systems of mass incarceration towards the front end of our community, so that kids are taken care of, that they have housing, that they have access to counseling and trauma-informed care. Because when we do those things on the front end of our communities, we cultivate long-term sustainable safety. And the failure to invest in those basic dignities of our children result in long-term collective unsafety in our communities and a perpetual cycle of suffering.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I feel like as like someone who goes to high school and like sees a lot of people who could end up like being in the school to prison pipeline, it's very, I guess, settling to know that there's someone running in favor of like restorative justice programs for kids that I've seen in like my school. I also wanted to ask a question that's a bit, I guess, different than the last one, but both the APA and APA are like organizations primarily run by like Asian students as well as like Asian individuals. So I was wondering, what are you planning to do to combat the recent uptick in Asian hate?
Yeah, thank you. You know, as I mentioned, I'm the proud son of Muslim immigrants from South India who raised me and my siblings here in Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County, as we can see reflected in this circle, is one of the most diverse places in the country. It's now become a majority-minority county, but we have never had a person of color as our Santa Clara County District Attorney in the over 170-year history of the office. And that matters because diversity does matter. Having lived experience in these seats of power is really critical so that we have someone who is representative of the community, that understands the needs of people of color, that understands the needs of immigrant communities, both people that were children of immigrants or immigrants that have come here, documented or not. And it's also really critical that we have a district attorney's office that is culturally competent, that understands that there are people that suffer from hate crimes and suffer from racially motivated attacks that may not want to report the harms or may not know how to report those harms because they're not familiar with the constructs of our justice system. So it's really critical that that diversity at the top then extends down into culturally competent services that are delivered from the DA's office. That does extend out into all of our community, into cities like Cupertino, letting people know that the DA's office exists, that it is a place of service and support and positive intervention, that when people do suffer harm, that they can safely report it to individuals in the DA's office or in local law enforcement or other mechanisms in our community where they will be met with people that speak their language, that may look like them, that can understand their unique cultural needs. I, as a Muslim Indian American, may have unique issues that may prevent or may promote me in talking with individuals in law enforcement, but there may be someone from a different background that has their own unique needs, and it's essential that we have a DA's office that understands that and meets our community with individualized, culturally competent services and intervention. And the last thing I'll mention about hate crimes is that there may be a tendency in all of us to respond to hate crimes solely with jails and prisons, solely with punishment. And I understand that instinct, because when our community has been harmed, when our people have been traumatized and hurt, we want there to be answers. And our collective general response is to respond with jails and prisons and convictions. But that's actually not making our communities safer. And in our jails and prisons are actually where we have the only form of racial segregation still alive in our communities. It's where it's actually one of the most racially segregated places. It's actually where we're breeding some of the cultural intolerance that results in the hate in our community. It's really critical that we understand the root causes of hate crimes in our community, which is lack of cultural competence and lack of cultural tolerance, mental illness, other forms of poverty, and that we have restorative justice programs and interventions that actually address those root causes of harm, as opposed to just simply attaching punishment. Because when we do that, we again cultivate long-term sustainable safety for our community's most vulnerable people.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. I just wanted to open up the floor to the audience. If any of you have any questions before I continue.
She had her hand up.
The question that I had, you mostly answered it,
Sure.
Mr. Fong, and I was wondering why that Senate bill was only trying to protect 14 and 15-year-olds and not all the way up to 17-year-olds.
I think it's part of an incremental effort, because the law has been so long-standing that where we have prosecuted children as adults, and so readily and so easily. I think it was an effort on the part of the legislature to take it in baby steps. I think long-term, the science tells us, the research on adolescent brain development tells us that we collectively, all of us, especially our young people, are not fully formed human beings until about the age 25. Our brains literally have not developed, and as a result of that, children, especially 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, especially those that have suffered trauma or are living already in poverty, are less likely to have impulse control, less able to remove themselves from peer pressure or traumatic conditions, are less likely to understand the long-term consequences of their behavior. And so my hope is, and I will be part of this, elected or not, is to continue this trajectory where we have now ended the practice of prosecuting 14 and 15-year-olds as adults. The next step is to end the practice of prosecuting 16 and 17-year-olds as adults. We've also started to cultivate youthful offender programs that address the needs and respond to the harms committed by 18 to 25-year-olds, but I think we can do more. And so it's part of that incremental progression. As I mentioned, under our incumbent, if it was up to him, he would continue to prosecute 14 and 15-year-olds as adults and continues to prosecute 16 and 17-year-olds. So one of the primary reasons that I'm running is to take that next step and be part of that long-term transformational change where we treat kids like kids and give them the accountability, services, and interventions that they need so that our communities and they are safer in the long term.
And that was Senate Bill number?
That was SB 1391. It passed in 2018. So that, and previous to that on the ballot was Prop 57, which, so in my early parts of my career, the district attorney had unilateral ability to prosecute children as adults. No, they didn't have to answer to anybody. They didn't have to get authorization from a judge or anyone else. But in 2016, our California voters passed Prop 57, which then took that unilateral ability away from prosecutors and made it so that judges, after hearing evidence and hearing about the child, hearing about the case, then made a decision whether to send that child to adult court or keep them in juvenile court. So again, we're seeing a trajectory moving in the direction of erring on the side of keeping kids in juvenile court because of their unique needs, because of the science on adolescent brain development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. My name is Ted Scarlett, and my case is intertwined in my question to you. However, I'm not here for me. I'm here because of what I've been through. I have a lot of inside information of the workings of our criminal justice system, or should I say injustice system. And also I was a ran for city council. I also ran for county supervisor. I advocated for an 85-year-old man. The county stole his priceless Boeing PT-17 Stearman. And therefore, I've been a political adversary, not by choice, to many of the people that keep cycling through these positions, school board, city council, county supervisor, so on. So, the problem that I see, it's a big problem, is that the judges are employed by the state of California, and they receive their pay and compensation from the state of California. What's happened is I've discovered that in addition to that, Santa Clara County is paying judges what they call judicial benefits. And it's an arbitrary amount based on I don't know what, but no judge gets the same amount. Okay, no judge gets the same amount. And it seems that the judges that get the most money, in my view, are the most corrupt. So where it's really critical, and I believe every case that's gone through the criminal justice system because of what I just described is void. The judges are receiving money from the county. And who's prosecuting these cases? The county. They're not disclosing this, okay? And this is where the public defender's office failed me. 7.5 years ago, I was ripped out of my home of 32 years, charged with a fake crime, recording a quitclaim deed on my home. And after I'm an ex-IBM, I have no criminal record. I coach Little League Baseball, I formed neighborhood associations. They dragged me out of my home, threw me in a jail cell for 3 days, no phone call, nothing. While I was out of my home of 32 years, they cleaned out the entire contents of my home. I'm now homeless in the streets and trying to defend myself. The public defender started failing me immediately because this should have been stopped immediately. However, after 9 months, I succumbed to a heart attack and almost died. Now I'm back out in the street. Actually, I left the emergency in the hospital and was put out to a homeless shelter. Then the judge and the district attorney demanded I come to a hearing just 4 weeks after this heart surgery. And the doctor, the cardiologist, sent a letter saying the man is subject to sudden death. And they said that we don't care. So I went and I started having another heart attack in the courtroom. The judge was told, she came out of her office, went onto the bench, called the case, and prosecuted me while the ambulance is en route. My public defender failed me. I got rid of the public defender for a while. Now, the bottom line here, back to the real question for all of us. This system I've described must stop. The California legislature has twice tried to make law to give retroactive immunity for this. It's a federal crime to receive monies like they're doing. And again, the public defender's office in every case should be disqualifying all of these judges that sit on the bench that have received money from the county. Because any reasonable person would believe, if you're receiving $60,000, $80,000 a year from the county, and it's obviously based on the rulings they make that favor the county, because some get $40,000. This has to stop. And so what would you do if you're elected? Also, Rosen knows all of this, and he's got the judges in his pocket. And this is why the system we have is going the way it's going, and we need a change, absolutely. So what would you do to deal with this?
Yeah, thank you for your sharing your experience, and I'm sorry for what you've been through and are going through. It's really critical that we have a DA's office that has integrity, that is part of being a true check and balance in our system. Because we have a beautiful fabric that is set up in our communities where we do have judges and the judiciary. We have the public defender's office that is constitutionally mandated to be a source of accountability. And then we need the DA's office to have integrity and to be competent and to be rooted in the right culture in terms of seeking safety and justice in our community, as opposed to a DA's office that I've experienced, which has been a DA's office that is rooted in securing convictions and securing jail and prison sentences, and results in this sort of inhumanity that you're describing, that doesn't see people who have done harm as full human beings, instead just sees them as a means to checking off boxes in terms of felony convictions, jail sentences, and prison terms. And so it really is part of why, or the reason that I'm running, is to cultivate real cultural change in the DA's office, to move us away from defining justice simply by convictions and terms of incarceration, and towards a culture in the office that sees people as full human beings, including those who have suffered harm, those who have been accused of harm, and the rest of our community, and to cultivate a culture that is about solving harm in our community as opposed to purely punishing it, and doing so in a just way with integrity. And so that's what I've bared witness to on one hand, and why I'm running now as for the seat, because I believe that we can do so much better here in Santa Clara County.
Okay, yeah, sorry to cut everyone off short, but yeah, we're reaching the end of this segment. So I just wanted to give Mr. Khan a few minutes to just give some conclusionary remark.
Sure, thank you. I really appreciate all of you being here. I appreciate this opportunity to share. Before I do have to leave shortly after I finish my concluding comments, because I'm going to another event in Palo Alto. So I do want to make sure that everybody knows how to stay in touch with me and get in touch with our campaign. I brought some flyers there, but our website is votesajid.com. My email is sajid@votesajid.com. Liang has my contact information. You can get it from her. You can also find me on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's a unique moment here in Santa Clara County and in this country right now. We saw a reckoning and an opening here in this county unlike any other in 2020. Even here in the city of Cupertino, we saw rallies for Black Lives Matter. We saw rallies demanding for systemic transformational change in the aftermath of the killing of George Floyd. And there is a call in our community demanding real change in our community to ensure justice and dignity for all people. And my campaign is a byproduct of that call for transformational change here in Santa Clara County, to end mass incarceration, to hold police accountable, to fight back against police brutality, to again cultivate long-term safety in our communities. And we just saw the appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson to the United States Supreme Court, the first Black woman to be anointed to that position, and a former public defender too. And there was a recognition of why we needed someone with her lived experience, both as an individual and as a professional, in that Supreme Court position, because her lived experience as a Black woman, as a person of color, as a public defender, makes her uniquely qualified to breathe life into our Constitution, to fight back against mass incarceration, to afford people their true dignity and rights across this country. And in the same spirit, I'm asking all of you to reflect on and rethink and redefine who we want leading us in our top seat at the District Attorney's Office. It's time for change. It's time for a new direction. It's time for new ideas in that top seat. My unique experiences as a child of immigrants, as a person of color, as a public defender, make me uniquely qualified to lead us collectively into a new era in Santa Clara County. I'll tell you, I'm a first-time candidate. I was actually, the last time I ran for office was when I was a student senator at UC Berkeley. Before that, I was student body president at San Jose High. But despite the fact that I'm a first-time candidate, I've earned the endorsements of leaders like State Senator Dave Cortese, Assembly members Ash Kalra and Alex Lee, former Congressman Mike Honda, retired Judge Ladoris Cordell. I'm the only DA candidate endorsed by Planned Parenthood advocates Marmonte. And so they all recognize that it's time for a new direction in Santa Clara County, and I'd be honored by you joining us collectively as we walk into this new era, and I hope that you vote for me for Santa Clara County District Attorney by June 7th. Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting yourself out there. It's not an easy thing to do, especially with who we have in the administration. So it's a very brave thing to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Khan for giving us time.
Speak louder. Speak louder.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Khan for giving us time today to come and talk to all of us. But I also wanted to extend my gratitude and all of our gratitude to everyone who's here. Students like myself who aren't old enough to vote are like relying on adults to make the educated choice. And your willingness to be here shows your commitment to our democratic process. So thank you. And don't forget to cast your vote on June 7th for whichever candidate you believe is best fit to